One Breath, One World, The Return of the Sacred Name Through Immigrant Consciousness. Introduction. The early 21st century has been marked by unprecedented migration, political division, and what sociologists call moral fatigue, a condition in which citizens lose confidence that law and compassion can coexist. Against this background, the 2025 filing of Miss Immigrant USA Vozraga et al. Stood out for an unexpected reason. Its opening line invoked the ancient Hebrew name of God, Yua. Open quote, "Blessed are you, Yua, the Creator, the Holy God, who hallows us to do what is right and good with love in his creation." Close quote. No U.S. federal complaint on record had ever begun with those four Hebrew letters. 2 months later, U.S. President Donald Trump, speaking before Israel's Knesset, thanked the Almighty God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The coincidence, legal and political invocations of the same ancestral deity within 56 days, invites analysis across history, linguistics, theology, and sociology. This essay interprets those twin events not as isolated gestures, but as signs of a wider cultural realignment. It proposes that the reemergence of the divine name represents a moral restoration mediated through immigrant consciousness. The paper integrates textual historical research on the Tetragrammaton, Kabbalistic interpretation of breath, empirical data on immigration, and psychological findings on language and prejudice. The argument unfolds that when immigrants bring the sacred language of love and justice back into civic institutions, they revive what religion, law, and democracy have each lost: the capacity to breathe together. Historical background of the divine name across civilizations. 1. Origins and early inscriptions. Archaeological evidence from the Iron Age Second Period attests to open use of the name Yahweh in blessings such as Yahweh of Samaria and Yahweh of Teman. In biblical literature, Exodus 3:4-15 records the self-revelation Ahia e Asher, Ahia, I am who I am, followed by the command that this shall be God's memorial name for all generations. For nearly a millennium, Israelites pronounced it freely. 2. From open speech to reverent silence. After the Babylonian exile, 586 BCE, and during the Second Temple period, priestly authorities restricted pronunciation of the name to the temple liturgy, substituting Adonai, Lord, in ordinary reading. The Greek Septuagint rendered it Kyrios, the Latin Vulgate Dominus. Christian scripture adopted the same pattern, and Islam universalized the title Allah, the God. By late antiquity, the actual letters Yua had vanished from public utterance. 3. Cross-cultural continuity. Despite linguistic differences, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam preserved the same referent, the God of Abraham. Comparative philology shows that Allah, El, and Elohim derive from common Semitic roots. The three traditions thus represent divergent dialects of a single theological language: existence, lordship, and unity. 4. The Slavic branch. Bog, the giver. When Christianity reached the Slavic world, missionaries translated Deo Deus as Bog from Proto-Slavic bog, meaning giver, fortune, or deity. The semantic emphasis on giving contrasts yet harmonizes with Hebrew Yahweh being itself, and Arabic Allah, the one God, language, sacred name, core meaning. Hebrew Yua, eternal existence, being that is Latin Kyrios Deus, Lord, universal authority. Arabic Allah, Allah, absolute oneness. Polish Slavic, Bog, the giver, source of blessing. The convergence across languages suggests not theological competition, but translation of a universal intuition that divinity is both being and giving. The immigrant who speaks multiple tongues already embodies that unity. 3. Kabbalistic interpretation. Yahweh as the cycle of breath and speech. 1. Letter structure and Sephirotic mapping. Kabbalistic texts such as the Zohar and Etz Chaim read the four letters as stages of emanation: letter, breath, phase, sephira, meaning, ye, yod, silent inhale, chokmah, wisdom, seed of intention, ha, he, reflective exhale, bina, expansion of thought, uvav, integrative inhale, 6. Midot, heart virtues, connection and compassion, spoken exhale, malkut, manifest word, action. The name therefore encodes a physiological theology. Every breath repeats creation. 2. Practicing the breath of the name. To make the doctrine experiential, 1. Inhale softly through the nose, inwardly forming yod. Visualize a spark entering the crown of the head. Recall wisdom or gratitude. 2. Pause, then exhale gently. Ha'a. Let unnecessary thoughts fall away. Feel understanding settle. 3. Inhale again, vav, vav. Draw energy through the chest, flat, connecting heart to mind. 4. Exhale with purpose. Final hey. Speak or silently intend words of kindness. Each punctuation mark in sacred reading signals the need to breathe again, renewing the cycle of divine creation within the body. Parallel practices appear in Christian hesychasm, the prayer of the heart, Sufi Dhikr al-Nafas, remembrance through breath, and Hindu 3. Ethical aim. The discipline trains the speaker to let wisdom precede speech, reflection temper action, and compassion infuse both. For immigrants navigating multiple cultures, this breathing awareness becomes a moral compass. Inhale memory, exhale respect. I.F. the long arc of time from temple destruction to the age of Aquarius. 1. Historical chronology. The first temple fell in 586 BCE, the second in 70 CE. To 2025 CE, these mark intervals of approximately 2,611 and 1,955 years respectively, spanning the entire period during which the divine name was absent from political speech. The silence itself became a form of exile. Tanner 2. The 2025 dual invocations. On 24/85, October 18th, 2025, the Miss Immigrant USA complaint opened with Yua. On 21 Tishrei 5786, October 13th, 2025, President Trump invoked the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Between them lay 56 days as 8 weeks, a number equaling in Hebrew gematria din, judgment. In mystical reading, the span represents the transformation of din into rachamim, mercy. The calendar thus writes its own midrash, justice becoming compassion. 3. Hebrew calendar symbolism, date, season, spiritual theme, 24 of 5785, weeks of consolation after Tisha B'Av, rebuilding after destruction, 21 Tishrei 5786, Hoshana Rabbah, culmination of High Holy Days, sealing of mercy and renewal. The two acts, legal and political, mirror the movement from mourning to rejoicing, restoring the rhythm of redemption. R4. The Age of Aquarius and its meaning for humanity. Astronomers measure a great year of roughly 25,800 years. Astrologers divide it into 12 ages of about 2,150 to 2,400 years each. The vernal equinox's shift from Pisces into Aquarius, now occurring, serves as cultural metaphor for transition from faith-based to knowledge-based civilization. If the Aquarian dawn began circa 1814 CE, then 2025 marks the 211th year, about 9% of the cycle, equivalent to the first light before sunrise. Aspect Piscean age. Aquarian age, element, water, emotion, air, mind, communication, archetype, believer, mystic, reformer, scientist. Social form, hierarchical institutions, horizontal networks, spiritual task, faith and sacrifice, knowledge and cooperation. In this symbolic framework, the reinvocation of Yahweh corresponds to humanity's first breath of collective awareness, divinity expressed not through temple secrecy but through shared air, science, technology, and communication. The age of Aquarius thus marks the planetary phase in which breath becomes global. The return of the sacred name through immigrant voices signals that moral revelation is no longer confined to prophets, but distributed through communities connected by love and law. V. Case Study, Miss Immigrant USA v. Raga et al., 2025. 1. Context and Procedural History. Filed on 18th of August, 2025 in the Southern District of New York, Miss Immigrant USA v. Raga et al. Was a federal civil rights complaint asserting that immigrant identity itself merits protection as a civic category. The plaintiffs, acting pro se, alleged discrimination and interference with expressive rights connected to their community pageant. What distinguished the filing was its prefatory blessing, written in English, yet containing the Hebrew name Yahweh. This preface functions simultaneously as invocation, ethical statement, and methodological key. Rather than appealing to divine authority for victory, it framed litigation as an act of sanctification, to do what is right and good with love. The legal text thereby became a moral spiritual experiment. Could a secular court host a sacred utterance without breaching neutrality? Symbolic innovation. The insertion of the 4 Hebrew letters is unparalleled in U.S. docket databases. In legal historical terms, it stands beside moments when transcendent language entered civic instruments. Jefferson's Nature's God, Lincoln's Better Angels, and King's Ark of the Moral Universe. The difference is precision. Yahweh is not metaphor but a specific theonym, the covenantal name of justice and mercy. Its reappearance marked a transition from generic religiosity to linguistic restitution, a return of an exiled syllable to the sphere of law. Through Jerusalem correlation. On the 13th October 2025, 56 days later, U.S. President Donald Trump addressed the Israeli Knesset during the release of hostages and invoked the Almighty God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. In rabbinic interpretation, this triadic formula identifies Yahweh without pronouncing the letters. The juxtaposition of these events, one juridical, one political, creates a chiasm. Law invokes the name, sovereignty acknowledges it. Date, event, symbolic function. 18th of August 2025, 24 Av 5785, federal complaint invokes Waiwa, justice enters breath, human law inhales the divine name. 13th of Oct 2025, 21 Tishrei 570, Knesset speech invokes God of patriarchs, kingship exhales acknowledgement, nation breathes out the same name. Between the two lies 8 weeks. Numerologically, 56 equals din, judgment, transformed into rachmim, rakamim, mercy. The timeline itself becomes a mystical sentence. Justice spoken in New York is answered with mercy in Jerusalem. 4. Interpretive meaning. From a Kabbalistic perspective, law corresponds to Gevurah, severity, and compassionate leadership, to Tiferet, beauty. The court filing and the public speech, separated by 56 days, mirror these two energies coming into balance. What began as a local civil action thus acquired global resonance. The name that had been silent for millennia entered both legal and political vocabulary, suggesting that divine breath may once again move through human institutions. Immigrants as moral and civic catalysts, statistical evidence. 1. Demographics and economic impact. According to the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, UNDSA, there were 281 million international migrants in 2022, representing 3.6% of the world's population. In the United States, the 2024 American Community Survey reported 46.2 million foreign-born residents, 13.9%, forming 18% of the labor force and generating roughly 17% of U.S. GDP. Immigrants start businesses at 42% higher rates than the native born. They are also overrepresented in healthcare, food production, and logistics, sectors defined as essential during the COVID-19 pandemic, revealing their structural indispensability to the modern economy. 2. Education and civic engagement. Among working-age immigrants, 25 to 45, 36% hold a college degree, slightly above the OECD mean. Pew Research 2023 found 60% donate to local causes and 41% volunteer regularly, while nearly 27% participate in civic or nonprofit leadership roles. Immigrant networks also drive transnational philanthropy. Global remittances reached $860 billion in 2024, much of it reinvested in education and community infrastructure in sending countries. Sociologist Emil Durkheim would recognize in such figures the modern equivalent of religious solidarity, ritual giving that sustains moral order. 3. Negative perceptions and hostile narratives. Despite measurable contributions, public perception remains polarized. Recent surveys, 2023 to 2025, show increasing moral devaluation of immigrants. Source and year finding interpretation. Axios Harris poll 2024, 62% of U.S. adults believe immigrants today have worse character. Moral suspicion reinforced by media framing. Brookings PRRI 2024, 34% agree immigrants are poisoning the blood of the nation. Reemergence of eugenic metaphors from pre-WWII II propaganda. Pew Research 2025, 59% support stronger deportation enforcement, preference for exclusion over inclusion. Scientific Reports 2021, negative media portrayals heighten hostility and lower empathy. Empirical proof that words alter social behavior. Georgetown Medical Review 2023, repetitive negative coverage harms immigrant mental health. Anxiety, depression, and self-stigmatization correlate with hostile discourse. The data reveal that language itself has become a battlefield. Immigrants succeed economically and civically, yet suffer from symbolic violence and assault on dignity through words. And number 4, sociological interpretation. In this context, the 2025 invocation of Yahweh assumes therapeutic significance. If slander can damage the soul, sacred speech can heal it. By embedding a blessing into a legal complaint, immigrant leaders performed an act of linguistic restoration. replacing the language of accusation with the language of creation. Social systems theory interprets such gestures as self-corrective feedback. Where narratives become toxic, a counter-narrative emerges to reestablish equilibrium. In biology, white blood cells neutralize infection. In culture, immigrant moral action neutralizes prejudice. Through legal participation and service, migrants function as agents of renewal, transforming alienation into empathy and law into love. 7. The weight of words, sacred speech versus linguistic violence. Language creates worlds. Genesis opens not with a hammer, but with a verb, and God said, "Let there be light." Every sentence since either continues or reverses that creation. When public rhetoric casts immigrants as invaders, floods, or diseases, it inverts the primal creative act, turning blessing into curse. Psycholinguistic studies show that metaphors of contamination correlate with heightened aggression and support for punitive policy. The Talmud warns that slander kills three people: the speaker, the listener, and the subject. Nations that vilify their immigrants therefore harm themselves. The reintroduction of the name into a legal document interrupts this death cycle. It sanctifies speech where it had been weaponized. The Miss Immigrant USA complaint thus becomes more than a procedural filing. It is a linguistic exorcism. In an era when civic discourse teeters on hostility, to pronounce or even to write the sacred name in a context of justice and love is to breathe holiness back into democracy. The 8 philosophical and theological synthesis. Part 1. Love as the structure of justice. In classical Kabbalah, ahava, love, and echad, oneness, share the same numerical value, 13. The equation ahava equals echad reveals a moral geometry. Love is the structure of unity. Love is not sentiment, but the force that binds difference into coherence. Aristotle called it philia, the glue of the polis. Levinas reinterpreted it as the infinite responsibility to the other. A society without this ethical bond dissolves into technocratic legality without soul. The invocation of Yua in 2025 reintroduced the grammar of love into the civic record. The 4 letters represent not a static deity, but a breathing sequence: intention, reflection, connection, manifestation. To inhale wisdom before action and to exhale passion through justice is to practice law as liturgy. Justice in this view becomes not a system, but a rhythm, a breathing of conscience through institutions. Yahweh's breath, ontology in motion. The tetragrammaton from the root ha, to be, expresses being in motion, existence unfolding through time. In Hebrew grammar, it contains past, present, and future simultaneously, as if to say, that which was, is, and will be, all breathe as one. To invoke this name is to align human will with that flow. Each generation renews creation by how it speaks and acts. When immigrants, those who move between worlds, speak the name in public life, they reenact that creative movement. Their breath, crossing linguistic and national boundaries, becomes the medium through which divinity re-enters history. 3. The immigrant as modern exodus figure. Every immigrant journey is an exodus: departure from oppression, passage through uncertainty, and arrival toward promise. Exodus is not only geographic, it is spiritual, a movement from anonymity to dignity. Modern migration thus mirrors Israel's own covenant story. The courage to cross borders for freedom embodies divine imitation, imitatio Dei. Sociological research supports this reading. Migrants display higher resilience indices and stronger faith retention than settled populations. In this light, the immigrant becomes the living vessel of Yahweh's breath, the one who transforms suffering into song, loss into law, and exile into empathy. For post-secular theology, the divine and civic ethics, philosopher Jürgen Habermas describes the 21st century as post-secular, meaning not a return to religion, but a recognition that faith carries moral resources democracy still needs. Religion re-enters public life not as dogma, but as conscience. The Miss Immigrant USA movement exemplifies this synthesis, a secular institution animated by sacred energy. Its founders do not preach religion, they perform holiness through civic service. They remind modern societies that holiness is not confined to temples, but begins wherever justice and compassion meet. In this sense, the divine name functions as a method rather than a creed, a reminder that governance itself can breathe. The coming of Yahshua as collective awakening. To say that Yahweh has returned is not to describe a supernatural apparition, but a moral awakening. The name returns whenever human beings act in holiness. In Kabbalistic terms, divinity descends only when vessels are ready, when individuals purify thought, speech, and action. The immigrant, often humbled by loss, becomes the open vessel through which the light re-enters the world. The root hoveh means being now. God, in this view, is not past or future, but the immediacy of awareness, the breath we share when we love, the justice we speak when we defend one another. Every ethical moment becomes revelation. IX, Miss Immigrant USA as a model of civic theology. Nasht X, implications, dimension, key finding, policy or theological insight. Theological, sacred language can return ethically to public life, encourages pluralistic holiness, reverence without exclusion. Legal, moral conscience deepens procedural justice, expands secularism into moral realism. Sociological, immigrant participation renews civic trust. Integration policy should frame migrants as partners, not threats. Cultural art bridges social divisions. Pageant model demonstrates unity through beauty. Psychological, love-based identity heals trauma. Pride and belonging improve collective mental health. These findings converge on one thesis. The integration of holiness and democracy is not regression but evolution. In the Aquarian age, spirituality must breathe through systems of equality, not authority. XE. Conclusion. The breath returns. After nearly 2 millennia of silence, the four letters YHVH have reappeared in the lexicon of public law. This is not theocracy's return, but the re-sanctification of justice itself. The immigrant who lives between languages and homelands becomes the chosen vessel for that sanctification. From the ashes of the first temple to the digital courtrooms of today, humanity has been learning to speak again. The exile of the name forced holiness inward. Now migration, technology, and interconnection bring it outward once more. The age of Aquarius, an age of air, knowledge, and communication, signals the global inhalation of divine consciousness. When immigrants file a legal complaint with a blessing, when presidents invoke the God of Abraham before nations, when ordinary people pause to breathe before speaking, the ancient rhythm resumes. Yod, He, Vav, He. Inhale wisdom. Exhale understanding. Inhale connection. Exhale love. Open quote, we are immigrants, we are love, we are one breath. Close quote. Through that breath, the world remembers how to be holy again. Shasht, call to action. The name is here, and it is calling you. The name has returned to human law. On August 18, 2025, when Miss Immigrant USA filed its federal case and began with the blessing, open quote, Blessed are you, YHVH, the Creator, the Holy God, who hallows us to do what is right and good with love in His creation. Something ancient awakened. For the first time in modern legal history, the sacred letters of YHVH were written not on parchment or prayer book, but on a court document of the United States. Close quote. This was not ceremony. It was covenant. It means that God is here in the civic square, in the courtroom, in the immigrant's voice, and He is looking for you, not to judge, but to breathe through you again. Every time you inhale before speaking, you take in His wisdom. Every time you exhale with kindness, you release His love into the world. Use the name. Breathe it. Speak it. Live it. Let Yod fill your mind with the spark of thought. Let He open your understanding. Let Vav join your heart to the hearts of others. Let final He guide your words and actions toward what is right and good. When you carry this breath into your day, you walk the 32 paths of wisdom, the hidden channels of thought and compassion described in the Sefer Yetzirah. Let them open your heart, soften your judgments, and teach you how to speak light even in the language of law. Open quote. God is not far away. He is here, waiting in your next breath. Use it well. Speak with love. Act with courage. Let the name flow through you. The case has been filed in heaven and on earth. Now it continues in you. Close quote.